Continuing the Easter story as we find it in John's Gospel, chapter 20, verses 11 through 18. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I have some news for you, some breaking news. Right in that little space of time after Sunday school and as people were kind of rushing around to get ready for this service, the session called a meeting. And they said, "We've had such a wonderful morning already this morning. The sunrise service was particularly inspiring. Helen's message was right on target. And there was a delicious pancake breakfast after that. And then many people were able to go to Sunday school and continue their understanding and interpretation of the Easter message. We think it would be a good idea if you skip your sermon this morning." Really, what they said was, "We think it would be sort of anticlimactic. You might mess things up at this point. So it might be the better part of wisdom if you just set up, announce that, sit down, and let the choir sing their next big anthem, dismiss, and go home." It was unanimous. I didn't even get to vote. April Fools, right? April Fools. I can tell that by the look on some of your faces that you're really disappointed. Some of you sort of had that expression, "This was the lucky Sunday I chose to come to church." Come on, it is April 1st, all right? April Fools. And plus, I said it was breaking news. Breaking news. As soon as you hear that phrase, right, breaking news, you probably should know it's no news at all. I'm hearing that phrase all the time now, breaking news, and it's beginning to drive me crazy because every time I hear that phrase, breaking news, it's just the same thing they've been saying over and over and over again. It's kind of like, I've been listening to so much news, maybe you have as well, that you've sort of developed this way of filtering out so many things, but every time you hear that little phrase, breaking news, you're just sucked into it again. So you lean forward, or you don't turn the TV off, or you don't flip the station, you wait for the commercial. They said it was going to be breaking news, and they come back, and they're just talking about the same thing. It's not breaking news. Or they're talking, and you see the little bar of text scrolling across the bottom. What does it say? Breaking news. And you realize that the words scrolling across the bottom are just the same things they had been saying 30 seconds ago. Is there any more breaking news? We've had enough of this breaking news business. I imagine that when Mary went to the tomb on Easter morning, she wasn't really expecting any kind of breaking news. Probably not any kind of news at all. John tells us that she went to the tomb on Easter morning while it was still dark. The other gospel writers say she went early in the morning on the first day of the week, but John makes it a point to say, while it was still dark, just the way many of us got up this morning, while it was still dark, to come to the Easter sunrise service, and it stayed dark almost halfway through the Easter sunrise service this morning. But I think that John was talking about more than just the time of day when he said, while it was still dark. I think there was probably another kind of darkness that Mary carried with her to the tomb on that morning. That kind of darkness that you don't really expect to be dispelled. Consider the things that she had just witnessed a few days before. She saw Jesus be crucified. Mary Magdalene, along with Mary, the mother of Jesus, and her sister, according to John, Mary, the mother of Clopas, these three women stood next to the cross and watched Jesus be crucified. And they watched the soldiers pierce his side with a spear. Maybe they watched Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea collect his body and carry it off to the tomb, which John says was nearby. Those were certainly the images that Mary must have carried almost as a burden with her as she went out to the tomb while it was still dark. Maybe the only news that she was expecting would be the news that Ecclesiastes talks about in the first chapter. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Maybe that's the darkness she carried with her that morning. That sense of darkness that says the world just sort of reverts back to the way it always is. There's no denying the reality of death, no changing the reality of death. Power and hatred and violence and fear, they seem to have the last word. Maybe that's the kind of darkness she carried with her, expecting really to try and figure out how to live with again. She made her way on that morning in the darkness to the tomb. But when she gets there, as you know so well from hearing the story so often, when she gets there, as John tells it, she sees something which is different. She sees that the stone has been rolled away, and that's distressing, obviously, to her, disturbing. She expected the darkness of the world to be just as it always had been, but to see that stone rolled away, that just was adding insult to injury, wasn't it? She was upset and distressed. All John says is that she saw the stone rolled away. And so immediately she runs back to the disciples, to Peter and the other disciple, and she says to them, the stone's been rolled away from the tomb. And it's just almost as if she jumps to her own conclusion, and they've taken the body and we don't know where they've laid it. What kind of news is that to be bringing back to Jesus' closest friends? Is that what they would have expected to hear on that morning? It would be horrible news, wouldn't it? It would be horrific news. Imagine going to a grave site where you had just been at a burial service a few days before and had seen the casket there and had prayed over the casket and seen the casket lowered in the ground and the earth put back on the casket. And imagine going back or by the cemetery a few days later and all of a sudden seeing earth spread out everywhere. What would you do? You just wouldn't know what to do. And you'd probably do exactly what Mary did. You'd go run and tell your closest friends. Can you believe it? The stone's rolled away. Things aren't right. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. Even the darkness isn't like the dark is supposed to be. Something is breaking, but we don't really know what it is at this point. Mary doesn't know. Peter and the other disciple, the disciple whom Jesus loved, John in his gospel never names this disciple. He just calls him the disciple whom Jesus loves. They begin their race toward the tomb, and a sense of urgency collects as they run there together. The other disciple outruns Peter, but when he gets to the tomb, he stops and he hesitates and sees the stone's been rolled away, and he looks in, but that's all he does. And Peter runs right up and runs into the tomb. And he sees there this strange thing, The linen cloths are still there. The cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head is rolled up and put in a different place. And the pieces of the puzzle don't seem to fit anymore as they expected them to be put back together after Jesus' death. But they aren't really sure yet what it is all about, what could be happening. And so John tells us that this other disciple, after Peter walks out of the tomb, he goes in, he looks and sees the same thing. John says he believes, but we're not sure what it is he believes. And then he and Peter just walk away and leave, and they go back home. And in some ways, we aren't really sure where they are at this point, what they're thinking at this point, how they're beginning to make sense of what's happening at this point. They've been given some little pieces of evidence, but we don't know how they're putting it all together. And we're left with Mary. Mary standing there and weeping and trying to make sense of what's going on through tears. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt like you're trying to make sense of life, trying to make sense of the world and what's going on through tears? It's not easy to do, is it? You can't really see clearly. You know what your heart is longing for, but you know what you're also feeling and how your heart is breaking. And through tears, you're looking for something, but you aren't really sure what you can see. Mary looks in and sees something the others didn't. 2 angels sitting there. And the angels say to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And so then she has to explain these feelings and why she's weeping. "Sir, if you have taken his body, I'm looking for the body. Just tell me where it is." And then a voice calls out to her. She turns and she sees Jesus, but she doesn't know who it is. She thinks he's the gardener, and she says to him, "Sir, if you've taken the body, just tell me and I'll take it." The one thing that might bring Mary comfort at this point, give me that body and I'll be able to put things back in place as I'm trying to hold on to them as best I can right now. Just give me the body back and I'll be able to start over again. And then perhaps one of the most poignant words in all of Scripture, when Jesus says, the voice of a dear friend, "Mary." And suddenly, she not only has the pieces of evidence which John has been laying out in this story, but these little pieces of evidence which haven't been able to she hasn't seen clearly through everything that's going on. These little pieces of evidence, they pull her into something that changes her life forever. An encounter with the person who has loved her and known her and called her as one of his disciples and given her purpose and meaning and direction in life. And she now can say his name. She now can call out to him in a way that she always has and always will be able to. Rabboni, teacher. It all sort of starts to come together in John's gospel. For me, I think it comes together in John's gospel in a way that's entirely different from the way Matthew, Mark, and Luke remember Easter. They, I think, remember Easter with a heightened drama and with loud noises. It's almost as though they're like sitting next to the tuba player, like I've been sitting next to the tuba player this morning. There's a whole lot of emphasis going on when you sit next to the tuba player in the worship service. And in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there's a whole lot of emphasis going on. Earthquakes and dramatic people saying, "He's not here. Why are you looking for the living amongst the dead?" But in John's gospel, it's more gentle, it seems to me. It's more gracious. It's more inviting. It's so much more personal, so much more intimate, until we come to that point where we realize that everything has changed. And we're not who we thought we were, because the world isn't what we thought the world was, because it's now suddenly different, because the one whom we thought was gone is not gone, but is here. And his love is filling us again in a way in which we begin to understand will never leave us. Something is so different. But John pulls us into that so gracefully and so graciously and so purposely. It's such a gift, isn't it, to come to that point and that place of belief. You remember last week, if you were here, I was doing the children's sermon. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Doing the children's sermon is about the hardest thing you can possibly do. Give me 100 regular sermons, I'll do those any time, as opposed to a children's sermon. They're just tough, and there's all kinds of reasons. They're a tough little audience. They're sitting right here, and they're not going to give you much slack, and so you got to figure out what's going on. A lot of times when I'm doing children's sermon, I'm just trying to think of anything. So ideas will come to my head at the last moment, and with the better part of wisdom, I'll throw them out there. Who knows what's going to happen? And last week, remember, I've been talking about things that are waving, that we wave like on Palm Sunday. And one of the last things I thought of as I walked into church was, oh yeah, we'll have those little palm crosses. That would be good too. And so we talked about the little palm crosses, and we were talking about those with the children. And then the idea just popped into my head. Okay, you all hold up your palm crosses, all right now? And everybody held it up, and it was such an impressive thing to see all of you holding your palm crosses during the children's sermon. It just sparked another idea in me, and I said, okay, hold them up during the last hymn. And so we got to the last hymn, and I thought, I wonder if anybody's going to hold a cross up. And then I looked up, and everybody was holding their cross up in the air. So I had to lift my cross up in the air, and I felt bad that we didn't cross this to the choir because they didn't have crosses to hold up in the air. But it was an incredible sight to see you all holding your crosses as you sang. And it was a different sight. It's not something that we see here normally at Park Lake. I was afraid some of you might be having heart trouble because you had your hands raised in the air during a worship service, but you were holding a cross, so I guess it was okay. But to see you holding a cross like that, it was such a fascinating and interesting and moving thing. Because as you held that cross up in the air, I realized that you were thinking about it. And you were having to be careful in the way that you held it. So often when we do something like that, hold something up in the air, it can become kind of a weapon for us. I've got this up in the air, I'm going to hit you over the head with it. And so I imagine there would be some people who would take this cross and say, see, I was right after all. Boom! You can't do that to me. But you weren't holding it like that. You were holding those crosses, and you were looking at them, I thought, in a way that seemed to be saying to you, this cross tells me something about myself that I need to hold on to, and I need to remember. This cross tells me something about the way that God loves me and what my life means to God. And it was an amazing thing to see you begin to recognize that and remember that and be embraced in that as you held that cross in the air and let it begin to define you and to define who you would be to the world. I think that's what's going on even in this Easter story. When Mary hears Jesus say her name, Mary, and the evidence of everything that God has done leads to her encounter with the risen Christ and the power and presence of God's love, defining her, making her, giving her life itself forever and ever. I read a little story by a pastor named Christopher Gerada. He had done an internship in a large hospital with an outstanding heart center in it. And during that internship, he had heard some of the chaplains tell this story. They told this story about how there at the hospital there was a well-known heart surgeon, and he was very active in the life of his church. And one day his minister asked him, do you think it would be okay if I came with you to one of your surgeries? If I can just kind of be in the corner of the room, I'd like to observe it. And so the heart surgeon said, yeah, that'd be okay. So the minister accompanied him in that heart surgery, and the minister said it was the most amazing thing to see that heart surgeon work on this patient, open the body and open the chest, and then begin to operate on the heart and do all the different things that need to be done. Then it came toward the end of the surgery, and he saw the heart surgeon start to gently massage the heart. And nothing happened. And so then he saw the surgeon begin to massage it a little more forcefully, and nothing happened. And he saw the various people in the room start to walk around and become more aggressive in the things that they were doing and seemed to be getting a little bit anxious. And the minister thought to himself, oh my gosh, here this surgeon's going to lose this patient. I'm going to be here in this room, and this is not what I expected would happen. And then he watched the surgeon walk over to the head of the patient and lean down, and he pulled his mask down, and the surgeon said, Mrs. Johnson, Evelyn, this is your surgeon. The surgery has gone very well. Everything is just as it is and should be. Tell your heart to start beating. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And as immediately as he said it, as he called out her name, her heart started to beat again. Don't we come here this morning hoping that with the breaking news of Easter, our hearts will start to beat again? That we will hear our name, and the life for us will begin to be the life of God's love? That's what happens. That's what happens. Do you remember another children's sermon a few weeks ago? When names were important, we were baptizing Tucker, I think, on that Sunday. And I was doing the children's sermon, and so we were laughing about the song that we sing to children, and I had another spontaneous idea. There's got to be somebody in this congregation who was baptized here a long time. Bob Clark was, so we asked Bob Clark to come stand in the front here, and the kids sang the baptismal song to Bob Clark. Bob, Bob, God claims you. God helps you, protects you, and loves you too. And it was just an amazing thing to see. See Bob standing here and to hear his name sung in that song again, just as he had been named in his baptism here at this place. You know what I think Mary said to Peter and the other disciple when she went and she ran and told them, he's risen? I think they said, Mary, what are you talking about? I think she started to sing, Peter, Peter, God claims you. God helps you, protects you, and loves you too. We, your family, all agree, a child of God you'll always be. Peter, Peter, God claims you. Go and tell my disciples. Tell them, as you were told at the beginning of John's Gospel, the light has come into the world, and the light was the life of all people, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. As you were told at the beginning of John's Gospel, for those who believe in him, he gave power to become children of God. As you were told there in John's Gospel, my sheep hear my voice, and they know my voice, and I know my sheep, and I call them by name. As you were told again and again, as you heard Jesus say to Mary, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will never die, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die again. Do you believe that? As you were told, all these pieces of evidence are going to come together until finally you encounter this living Jesus Christ who can fill your life with love and hope and the voice of God calling your name. Go and tell. Open up your hymnals, if you don't mind, to the back. I think the song's back there. And sing with me, but use your own name to start off with, all right? Open them up and sing with me this little song. Use your own name to start off with. 1, 2, 3. Daniel, Daniel, God claims you. God helps you, protects you, and loves you too. We are family, all agree, a child Stop. Jesus said for you to go and tell. Now look at somebody around you. Somebody you care about. Somebody you're worried about. Somebody you think needs to hear this. Now use their name. 1, 2, 3. Helen, Helen, God claims you. God helps you, protects you, and loves you too. We this day do always be a child of God. You'll always be. Stop. A child of God you will always be. I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe it? Amen.